1974, I was a student in Chester, and I lived on a pair of floating chicken hutches, which I sort of sorted out because I didn't fancy paying rent for a flat or something. And somebody offered me a full-length narrowboat for £100, and here she is, Lilith. She now belongs to the Wooden Canal Boat Society. I rebuilt her between 1974 and 1983. There was one plank left from the original boat, and doing that I just got into learning about wooden boats. Went and worked at the Boat Museum in Ellesmere Port for a while, and she's been sort of stalwart of our organisation ever since we set it up. She's a little bit poorly now, so you know, it's 40 years since we finished work on her, so she's going to need a little bit of work. She was originally Stewart's and Lloyd's number 9, and she was built just for carrying stuff in and out of an ironworks near Hazel. But she got the name Lilith sort of by chance. And if anyone wants to Google Lilith, you'll find it very, very interesting. So there we are, Lilith, but she's an unpowered boat. That's a butty. Originally she was what was known as a joey boat, a very simple shape, which was handy because I didn't know what I was doing boat building. So we sort of learned on the job, but there was no complicated bits on that one. It was all sort of the planks on the bow and stern had to be steamed to a curve, but there were no complicated shapes or complicated twists in them. So I had a butty. Butty's nice, but it hasn't got its own power. And a couple of years later, I called in at Taylor's Boatyard in Chester, and David Jones, who was running the place then, said, "Do you want to buy a boat?" And I said, "Well, if it doesn't cost more than about 30 quid, I might be interested in it." He said, "Well, all right then." So he had the next boat, which at that time was known as Sarah. All he wanted was the engine out of it, and so I bought the hull, back cabin as it was then, well, it had a full-length conversion on as well, for £25, and I got a motorboat now. Well, no motor, but never mind, we'll sort that out. And started work on what I now found to be called originally Forget-Me-Not, and very quickly realised that this was a lot more complicated a boat, and I couldn't do it in quite such a piecemeal way as I'd done Lilith. So me and a few friends got together. It'd be a good idea to form an organisation to get Forget-Me-Not restored. I met the son of the guy who had the boat built originally in 1927 as a horse-drawn boat, and then 2 years later was motorised, and that's the form in which it is now. So that one was restored between 1987 and 1994, and that's now our motorboat. It does all our towing. Its first job was actually to carry a load of granite sets down to Braunston, so she's done a little bit of carrying work. Again, it's 30 years since she was restored. Excuse me. So she needs a bit of work again. Midlife overhaul, I call it. Anyway, I was busy working on rebuilding Forget-Me-Not. What I find is, if you get stuck into work on a wooden boat, somebody offers you another one. We got a phone call from London, a guy called Peter Stone, who had this boat, Hazel, and he said, "Would you like it?" Which was pretty generous because it had a residential mooring in central London, and he could have sold it for quite a lot of money, but him and his wife, they knew what happened to old wooden boats that are just like sold as cheap accommodation, so they wanted somebody to look after it. So we sort of did a deal with them to bring this up north. We put her on dock and sort of went, oh dear, because every bit of the boat really needed renewing. But nevertheless, for 10 years, my friend Maxine and Legs and their daughter Kaylee lived on board. And then eventually we got the funds together with the help of Hazel sponsors to take the boat up to a boatyard in Staley Bridge and completely rebuild it. And she's now a well-being boat, so she's available for people who might be living under stress, depression, or any kind of mental health worries, to spend time on the canal. It's a great place to get your head together. And then across on the other part of the museum arm, if you want to walk across there, I can show you Queen. Now, Queen is the oldest surviving wooden motor narrowboat, and she's a quite amazing survivor, really. She last carried a load in 1947, which is the reason she's got this sort of bent shape. That's what's known as hogging, and the reason that happens is that a narrowboat has more buoyancy in the middle and more weight at the ends and less buoyancy. So there's a constant pressure of the buoyancy pushing the middle up, and the weight of the counter block at the back and the stem post at the front weighing the ends down. And over time, especially as your planks weaken, this puts that curve in the boat. And there's not a lot we can do about it until she's completely restored. Now, Queen, she was built originally in 1917 by a company, well, for a company called Hildick and Hildick in Walsall, who were, as I understand it, malleable iron manufacturers. But for some reason, in the middle of the First World War, they decided to have a fleet of boats built, narrow boats, including some of these newfangled motorboats. And she had a, what was it called, British Cromhout engine originally. And she worked for them, we understand, running between Walsall and Brentford carrying coal. We're not quite sure why, until 1924, when most of them were sold to Harvey Taylor of Aylesbury. And at that point, their first skipper on Queen was an old friend of mine, Jack Monk, who that was his first motorboat, and he was very fond of it. And when I heard that she was sunk and abandoned, I basically said, look, we've got to get this boat, and that's what we did. It was an epic working party. Went down to Denham in Buckinghamshire, pumped the boat out with no idea she might have had huge holes in the bottom or something, but she wasn't too bad. And we hitchhiked her 200 miles to Runcorn, where we used to keep boats. And she's now here awaiting restoration. In 2001, the Waterways Trust, as it was then, paid for her to be plated up in galvanised steel, all the cavities underneath being filled with chalico, which is a wonderful material made of pitch, tar and horse manure. And that has basically held her together, but she's going to be the next big restoration project like Hazel was. There's an exhibition board here about her. It says the boat with 9 lives, because she was abandoned in 1947 when she finished working, rescued in 1949. She became a pleasure boat for, I think it was 38 years, with full length conversion like that. Sank left to sink in Walsall again. Then somebody rescued her, took her down to Rickmansworth, did a few bodges to keep her afloat, and sold her to somebody who then allowed her to sink again. So she is sunk when we got her. Yeah, she's just waiting for us to have the resources to get her up and running again. And we have the kind of engine that she had from 1924 onwards, the water drip Bollinger. So go along to the bow. You can see, well, you can see almost constant pumping. I'm pretty sure that Queen's Bottom Phillips, excuse the remark, is the original 1917 bottom, and it's pretty knackered. But if you look at that shape of that bow, it's a beautifully shaped boat. You don't see them like that much nowadays. So climb across here, and there's Helen and Sam at work sorting out the interior, which is a bit chaotic at the moment. These two boats are the youngsters. You wouldn't think so, the state of them. But this is Southam, built in 1936, and Elton, built in 1937, both at Walkers of Rickmansworth, and they're big deep boats, they're known as Big Rickies. Now, they're both built to run between London and Birmingham, carrying all kinds of goods for the Grand Union Canal Carrying Company. And they both finished working for British Waterways about 1962. Southam was fitted with this full-length conversion, with Queen pumping out again, in 1965, and we're keeping her as a converted boat, whereas Elton was bought by a guy called David Blagrove, who was a great proponent of canal carrying, and he used to carry coal on her to sell him along the towpath. Eventually she got sold off down to London, again in a cheap houseboat, and was abandoned, so we rescued her. She's playing submarines at the moment, something she does quite often, but hopefully we'll get her up and running eventually and get her restored. Next project at the moment is Southam, because you can see the cabin's in a terrible state. We did a load of work on the hull in 2019, intending to get stuck into the cabin in 2020. Unfortunately, 2020 sort of didn't really happen because of the little virus that was infecting the world. And after that, it's taken a lot of time to sort of build things up again. So Southam's just been left, the cabin has continued deteriorating. But hopefully before too long we'll start building her up, get her up and running again. She's fitted with an engine, even though she was originally, they were both originally butties, I should have said that, that's unpowered. But she was fitted with an engine in 1965, so engine's going to go back in. She's going to take a turn at towing, and we might also use her to go off to waterway events, possibly make her into like a floating craft shop, all these kinds of things. But the main thing about the Wooden Canal Boat Society is that when we restore boats, they're not just museum pieces, they do something. Hazel, as I said, is a well-being boat. Lilith used to work on the recycling project that ground to a halt with the pandemic, might restart at some point. Southam is going to go travelling the canals, promoting the society and giving our volunteers a chance to do a bit of boating. Queen and Elton, I haven't quite come up with a project for them yet, but there's a few ideas in the air. So, yeah, there we go, you've had your show around the boats.